Thanks. So my name's Emily. I work for PTC in our Virtual Center of Excellence. And I have a presentation and a demonstration to show today talking about some of the new improvements in Creo 7. Now, there's obviously a lot more than we can cover in 30 minutes that has been added and enhanced to Creo 7, but we'll try to cover some of those highlights. So those categories are going to include core modeling changes, right, to those core parametric features, multi-body design, generative design, Creo Simulation Live improvements, as well as additive manufacturing, detailing, and drawing. So these will all be covered in the presentation. If there's anything that looks useful or you have questions about, please feel free to reach out to any one of us and we can provide you with more information. Because we're just going to touch on the highlights to make you aware today. We don't have enough time to get too detailed. And with that, we're going to start here with some core modeling improvements. So some features that are going to apply to everyone, right? Some people use different extensions, but these core modeling features are in that base Creo parametric. So we have improvements to the import data doctor. So if you're bringing in outside geometry, for one thing, it can handle multi-body now, which we'll talk about multi-body a little bit later. But there's also a nice troubleshooter that's been added to look for open quilts to help you find those easily and fix them very quickly when dealing with imported geometry. We also have new display features for geometry representation. So if you're showing different geometry, for example, lattices compared to the body that contains them, examples such as this, these can be shown in different ways. So you can make some a little transparent, change colors, make sure that you're able to see and understand all of the geometry that you have in your models and make sure that it's called out maybe to someone who's viewing this who didn't create it. There are also improvements to the draft feature. There were improvements right in Creo 5 and Creo 6 to draft, but there's more improvements here in 7. So now you're able to easily draft already drafted surfaces. So for example, if you have a cone that's already drafted, but you need to draft some more in this one area, it'll automatically recognize what the existing draft angles are, and then you can easily detect and change those. So it makes it much easier to modify, to work around existing drafts. Really nice improvements to that draft feature. We also have improvements around the snapping capability. So this capability to snap to geometry was put in a while ago, and it makes it really easy to grab onto existing geometry. But now there are more tools to control that, right? So that you have control over when this is happening. So you can turn it off if you don't like it, or if you're working on models that it's just not the best environment for it. You can change it in the menu, or you can change it in the config option. So if you want to, do it in the config, then have that applied every time. If you want to change it in the menu on the go, no problem. You have this control now. We also have a new mirror tool inside of Sketcher. So this makes it really easy to grab something and mirror it on the go. So you can use any straight sketch entity as the mirroring line. And by default, it's not locked. So you can still move that around, move it to a new location, keep working with it and developing your sketch. And then whenever you'd like, or if you'd like to change the default, you can lock that, right? So lock it in place when you know where you'd like it to go. So this is really nice. It makes the mirroring function much more flexible, easy to use, and much faster to get to more complex shapes and models. We also have improvements around the design intent visualization. So just trying to clean up this area a little bit, make it easier to use the sketcher. So this includes modern icons, highlighting different references, things like this, right? So makes it easier to work, makes it easier to learn as well, because you can control how all of these are going to be displayed, and it's very easy to understand, right? So a little bit more clear to understand those design intent icons and highlights. You can also now set the appearance of the sketcher constraints inside edit dimension. So if you set it so that when you click on something, it won't just show the dimension, it'll also have those chosen constraints pop up as well. So again, really easy to understand the design intent to have those constraints shown whenever you want to view the more information about a piece or dimension. So moving on, we have some more improvements to Creo Simulation Live. Now, if anyone's not familiar, Creo Simulation Live, or CSL as we like to call it, is an analysis tool for the design engineer. It's a product that came out last year. It's very exciting. It's a partnership between us and ANSYS to give design engineers access to real-time, live, interactive simulation capabilities to guide their design decisions to get to a better model faster. So there are some improvements in 7 that have come out, both productivity improvements and a new addition to a CSL Plus. So some of those productivity improvements, right, the first one we're going to mention here is that you can now control the direction vector easier. So if you're applying loads and constraints, right, you want to put a force on it, there are a couple of new ways to do it when you're setting those. So you can select a piece of geometry that has the same vector direction as the load that you'd like to apply. So instead of using that default coordinate system and having to enter in all of those different components, you can just select the line or surface that you'd like to use that direction, and then choose, which way you'd like it to go on that direction, right, forward or backward, plus or minus. You can also choose any coordinate system. So another way to do this is, instead of using that default coordinate system, you can put in a custom coordinate system anywhere you'd like in your part, right? If that's where you'd like to apply the load, have it oriented in a way that you can apply the load easily in a positive or negative axial direction. Basically giving you more control over how you'd like to set up these models to easily apply loads and constraints. So just giving you the flexibility to work however you'd like, maybe speed some of these processes up, right, for some of you. There are also improvements made to the legend as well. So made it much easier to see what you need to see all in one place, so you can understand exactly what you're looking at and easily look at something different, right? A different result type, a different display, all right from the legend. So now you have you can control not only the units, but also the type of result, the type of rendering method, so right, von Mises versus deformations, surface rendering versus composite. Also, your maximum and minimums are going to be on this, changing, do you want smooth blended or lined legend color bars. So a lot of options all now from the legend. So you don't have to ever go back to that other tab, really. You can do a lot of that right from the window. We also have the ability to use simulation probes in behavioral modeling. So now you can say, all right, well, I want the stress here at this point to be at this value. Let's use the probe at that point to run a study for us and make some changes. Have Creo run through those changes to see what our best options are. How do we get to the stress that we want to get to, right? So let Creo explore those possibilities in behavioral modeling using the information that we got from CSL, from those CSL probes. We've added more real-world simulation constraint types, so ball, cylinder, planar, making simulation more realistic in this area. So a couple of new options. Support for multi-body design, another area that multi-body is a part of now. So you can run simulation live on multi-bodies, which makes it easy to set regions that you'd like to apply loads to, right? A specific region within a part. Things like cavities and internal or external areas can be defined as a multi-body, which makes it much easier to define that as a domain. We also have the addition of transient thermal studies. So we had the steady state thermal study available already, along with the static, right? So static, thermal, modal, and structural. Now we also have transient thermal studies. So understand what does it look like when you're starting, from the start of your study until you reach that steady state. So you can pause and resume the analysis just like you would in other simulation tools, but this is in CSL, so really opens a lot more possibilities. Another big addition is Creo Simulation Live Plus, which is the fluids capability in Creo Simulation Live. This is newly available to CSL and Creo 7, coming to some other versions of Creo, and it's the ability to simulate fluids and evaluate their behavior, both internal and external. It works in the same way as other CSL analysis would, so you can still interactively, right, change your model, work on your model while this is running, and it will automatically update to help you understand what those changes have done to your model in terms of fluid flow right through the domain. So you just create the fluid domain, and then you can show it. So just like the other analysis types, this is right on your model, updates in real time. You can see here that this is an example of that fluid flow. You can see where the velocity maybe is stagnant in some areas and the high points. You can also define the material to the fluid domains, and the Creo material properties have been specially redefined, right, so that they're optimized for fluid analysis, so that analysis is as accurate as it can be. So all you have to do is start the analysis, assign the material, and then see how it works, see how that fluid is running through your model and what your change might be able to do to affect that. Again, we have internal and external flow situations that people have been very excited for. So now you can do this and set it up just like any other CSL setup. It's fast and easy. I know sometimes fluids can seem more complicated, but Creo Simulation Live does a very good job of keeping this easy to set up and run and understand, even for a design engineer without any analysis capabilities. You also have great result options to view, different ways to view them, whichever gives you the most information of the model you're designing, so you have some options to run through to see what works best. You can see streamlines, particles, cut planes, probes, a lot of really powerful functions that are right on your model, done in that same analysis time. So definitely not anything that an analyst has to do for you, and a very powerful new part of Simulation Live. So moving on to multi-body design. Multi-body design is a huge addition to Creo. People have been excited about this one for a while, and the ability to support multi-body design has been kind of brought throughout Creo, right, and interwoven into all these different Creo functionalities that happen, such as CSL or generative design, which we'll talk in a minute. So you can define these bodies in your parts and assemblies and then treat them differently. So this is what multi-body really is. It's the ability to define specific regions within a part, so multiple regions in a part that are able to have different attributes, have different actions assigned to them. And this is the ability to treat them as different volumes. You can then use them in different ways for your part and assembly generation, right? So if you're designing a part, you can use these as construction, maybe use a certain body as a construction volume, and then keep that out of the mass calculation, if you aren't going to include them in the final. You can have bodies interact, so define features or patterns as a solid body, and then add it or subtract it or merge it with other bodies to create the part geometry that you're looking for. So you're going to see this all over. I mentioned it. This has been added to most Creo functional areas, so it's supported in a lot of different functions, but it can also be a huge productivity improvement to just that general Creo geometry generation, depending on what features it is that you typically generate. Now it's a whole different way to work, right? It's a whole new object type in Creo, so it's going to show up in the model tree under bodies. And they can have their own appearances, their parameters separate from the rest of the bodies. You can do Boolean operations with them, which makes them really flexible as a design tool. So if you merge, you subtract, you intersect, and then create new bodies as you need them. So you can define these on the go. You can define them from the start, define them on the go, make parts out of them later on if you need to. So a very flexible tool to use. And if you've never used it before, you really should, take the time to take a look at it and see how it could affect your workflow, because this could be a much faster way to do certain things. So for example, here we have something that has subtracted surfaces, right? We have these little grooves in this yellow piece. Now that could be done by generating surfaces and making cuts, or the new way to do it with multi-body is to create maybe a more simple geometry to create is the second body of gray, slats, right, in the shape that you want. And then you can have them intersect together, and then you can have those subtracted to get you here. So, and now instead of editing each individual cut or those surfaces, you just have to edit that gray solid body. And it might be a much faster way to do this. Moving on to generative topology optimization. This is we call GTO sometimes. It's a solution that can make some very interesting, very radical, very different set of changes to a part based on your design criteria. So it will generate geometry for you based on inputs such as what are your loads, your constraints, what are we trying to achieve, how are we going to manufacture that. So given all of these constraints, what's the best possible part I can have? And generative design shows you that. So it lets you do some exploration very rapidly, lets you try some different designs, different goals, different materials, different physics, different manufacturing constraints, right? How are you going to make this part in the end? And you can try all of these things out even if you're not familiar with them. Maybe you're not familiar with the considerations for designing a part for this new type of manufacturing. But with generative topology, you can have it take into account all of the considerations for these different things, such as materials and physics and geometry. And you don't have to assume any of these. You don't have to assume that this is the way you should do it. You can have Creo try it out in this new situation and see if you like that part better. So that's really the idea here is there are multiple studies, right? You can run a lot of different alternatives because it's so fast and easy to use. You don't have to just run one optimization study and say, okay, this is optimized. Don't just use it because it works. Try different studies out, try different geometry inputs, try different constraints, and understand what that does to the geometry of your part, and then compare all of those optimized results and say, I think this is the direction that we should go in for this product. So it really is a fast way to get you to a lot of different optimal designs that you can then weigh the different advantages and different geometries and understand what's the best for your part moving forward. And you can really see all of this happening because there are a lot of ways to view this. There are ways to view this process and the results. So when you see how the part changes, you can actually watch the part change as Creo modifies that geometry. You can also see how it changes when you modify inputs, right? So understand how changing those inputs or changing that input geometry affects what the outcome would be. How the loads are being carried in the part. Turn on your analysis results and understand how this geometry might differ from the geometry from a different input. It's a very good way to make a new, interesting part that works very well, and it's very easy to understand how it's going to work right from within this tool. You can interrogate and view the results right there. So what sort of stresses and deformations are you going to expect? What are you going to get from this design? And then, of course, start modifying. So use it as inspiration and build your own part off of it, your own geometry. Take it into your Creo part and use this as the geometry. Maybe make a couple of changes. Whatever it is that you might want to do, you have the option to do it because you're all right inside of Creo. And that's really the key point here is that this is all still in your design environment. So it's very easy to use these designs in an effective, efficient way that actually saves so much time and so much effort instead of creating just another thing that you need to do. So this means that it's easy to set up the study, it's easy to see what it comes up with, and it's very easy to integrate it with your model. So there are a couple of different ways you can integrate it to your model. You can output the results into a real editable Creo part, and this is done through a reconstruct button. So it'll actually turn your optimized geometry into regular BREP geometry. So this will be, in the end, completely editable Creo geometry, Creo part that you can, push on and pull on. You can also use it as inspiration, define parametrically. Whatever it is that you might want to do, you have the option. If you do use that BREP option, turn it into that editable Creo solid geometry, you have a compare tool to see exactly how that geometry is different from that optimized result model. Moving on to the additive manufacturing extension, couple of improvements here. So the first one to the stochastic lattice. The key here is that we have the ability now to conform to hard edges of a part. So if you're having these random beams, this gives you a lot of strength with relatively lightweight geometry, a lot of empty space, but a lot of strength out of it. And now you can have it form fitted to whatever part you want. So if you need solid, hard, flat edges on the ends, you need all of those beams to conform. That's a possibility now. You can have it follow along those surfaces, and it will keep all of those beams in that direction on that edge. We also have improvements to custom cells. So we've always had the ability, in our additive manufacturing tool, I should say, we have already had the ability to create your own custom cells for your lattice, make them whatever shape you want, just build the solid part and then use it as a lattice. But now custom lattices can also be made from non-BREP geometry. So if you have a curve or a quilt defined, you can control how the lattice might be built up from that. So this might be a faster process for work that some people might do in Creo if you're taking advantage of that custom cell option. We also have nice changes to the tray assembly. So again, another area that multi-body is going to be found in. You can now have multiple bodies within a single part file, which means you can assign different attributes for different areas. So this is especially wonderful when you go to the printer. So maybe there's a body that has a thin-walled section. Well, you can define a different material type or a different printer parameter for that thin-walled section of your part, all within the same part file, right? So changing the parameters based on what's best for that individual region of geometry without having to take over multiple part files or an assembly file. Likewise, we have some additions to subtractive manufacturing. So in the machining world, we have a couple improvements to the synchronized tool paths in the graphics area. So this is a viewing option, right? We've always been able to orchestrate the synchronization, but this is improving the visualization so you can really see what you have going on before you go into the real world. So makes it much easier to work with. In the synchronization menu, just choose the option to view these, highlight them, and see exactly what you've put together. We also have a go home capability that's new. So we've had the go home capability for a while, but some of the machines these days have multiple home positions. So Creo can accommodate that easily now. You have multiple go home positions that you can just assign or register, right? The go home 1, 2, 3, so forth, and be able to have multiple in that way. We also have a dedicated capability to explicitly call out Swiss machining. So if you have a machine with this capability, now you have the option to have all of the appropriate CL commands dedicated to that type in the output file. So some new improvements to detailing in MBD. We have a multi-body design support for drawings, another region that multi-body has worked its way into. So you can have, for example, a part with multi-bodies with different materials assigned all in one part. So one material in one section, one material in another. Now you can have different, cross-hatching, for example, in the drawing to show that. Repeat regions know what multi-bodies are as well, so you can exclude construction bodies and different materials as you would need to. And the drawing model tree will also support multi-bodies. So this really makes it easy to keep track of what's what and manage the bodies and the parts that you've made in Creo. You can also configure drawing view tooltips inside of drawings now. So when you would click on a view, it can tell you about that view, what part is in there, what model is active. Really makes it easier to work in the drawings because you can get to that information very quickly and easily. There's also a new summary command, be able to pop it up and see all the information about the drawing and the model. Really helpful if you didn't make this drawing or model, so you can see exactly what's going on and understand the references, makes collaborating that much easier. We also have a new option for drawing tree columns. So again, just allowing you to view the information that you need at a glance for you to be more productive, more effective while you're working. And new options for sorting the drawing tree. This has been available especially in the model tree, but now the drawing functions are going to conform to that as well. So it's very powerful, makes it to work a little bit easier. We have improvements to the hidden line removal function. So basically working on the display issue to take advantage of the power that we have in workstations today. These settings are controlled in the config.pro option. You can now move the arrow with the names. So when you have some different section arrows that you want to move around, you are able to drag those to a new area, but now the name will follow right with it. So you don't have to go back and look for this name that you've left on its own. It'll go right with the arrow, and this will also be included in later builds of Creo 4 and Creo 6. Another option is support for multiple leads. So if you have really useful for GTAL notes, symbols. If you have things that are calling out a couple of things, you can have this lead for multiple normal tangent leaders all coming off of one annotation. So a really great way to call out information so it doesn't overwhelm you. Align ordinate dimensions with a baseline is an option in drawings now. So this is the way the ANSI standards like to do it. And when that's set as your standard, you'll have this capability as well. More control over the length of intersected contours. If you have an overlap, no problem. You can set a value for that, so you can control exactly what that's going to look like. You also have the ability for Creo to identify the child view for you. So Creo can tell you exactly which one this would go to, making it really easy to track down what you need, especially if you're not the one who made it. Really nice for multiple page drawings as well. Just select the one that you're looking at, have Creo tell you which one it goes to, and then easily pop right over there. No searching around or anything. PTC is continuing to add improvements for GTAL, so the ability to control things like gaps for the new ISO standards, as well as continued support for the latest ISO and ASME standards. Really helps you keep your drawings up to date and easy to interpret. If you have new people coming in, right, it's important that you're up to standards so that anybody can understand this, right, no matter where this might go. We have another example is the alignment of spacing for composite GTAL. So how do you want these to fit together? New symbols, some particularly exciting ones are the angularity, symmetry, but there are there are a number of other very good symbols as well, so take a look at those. Updates to the parser for the syntax checker. This helps to keep you formatted for the new standards. Just keeping an eye on making sure that all of your callouts are up to date. Couple additions to Render Studio. We have the option now for pause and resume during rendering. This is really nice if you need certain resources that are allocated towards the rendering. You can pause it, use those computer resources for whatever other tasks you might need to do. And when you go back and resume, it'll pick up right where it left off. So no need to start over. You can also render the mannequin vision window if you want a photorealistic first-person view. So you put a person looking at your product or your machine from how it would look from their perspective, and then render that in a photorealistic manner. We also have more options for custom floor planes as the environment settings. You can flip, offset, move shadows, move reflections around, whatever it may be that you want to do. A couple of big additions in augmented reality. These are particularly exciting for anyone who's not familiar with our AR design share capability inside Creo. It's just a button right in your toolbar, and every base seat of Creo allows you to, in a couple of clicks, put your product in augmented reality for you to be able to manage and view in terms of a design review or understanding your model. And now you have the addition to be able to publish, right, to publish to augmented reality combined states. So you can not only publish your standard model, but also combined states of your model, including simplified reps, exploded views, section views, different appearances. Once you're viewing that model in augmented reality, you can switch between the views very easily. Just slide back and forth, pop between one and the next to really get an idea of what's going on in your model. You can also use these views when publishing to Vuforia View, which gives you just some more options for creating cool AR experiences if you want more options than just viewing it and spinning it around and enlarging it. That's where Vuforia View would come in. You have a couple of new options there. A couple of new improvements to easy tolerance analysis extension, really more of a total overhaul of this tool. It's a big update. So the extension for this is now called the Easy Tolerance Analysis Extension. It's powered by Submetrics. So this 1D StackUp tool will replace the 1D StackUp tool that we had before. It does the same thing, but it's a different engine. So now it's much easier to use, allows you to easily clean up your model. You have most of the same capabilities. You're still going to define those multiple 1D StackUps on your model. You can also use it with GD&T to get a complete understanding of how this part needs to be controlled in manufacturing to get the metrics that you need. So all those annotations or GD&T annotations that you might have can be included in these analyses automatically by Creo. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my presentation. I do have a short demonstration to show you, just to give you a little preview of our Creo Simulation Live Plus extension, the new fluids capability inside of Creo. So here we're looking at our Creo 7 user interface, and up on the screen is the muffler for a Royal Enfield motorcycle race. So this is a customer of PTC's who we've used this motorcycle, right, for a lot of our demonstrations. And this was created in Creo, and this is the muffler system. For this example, we're gonna assume the position of, what if we made some updates to this, some product updates? What would our changes do to the movement of fluids through our piece? And you can see through this cross section, right, there are a couple of different components in this muffler that you might want to start playing around with. Now, this is going to be very easy to do in Creo Simulation Live. If you move to your Creo Simulation Live tab, you'll see that in the Add Simulation drop-down, there's an option in Creo 7 for that fluid simulation study. Now, these are set up similarly to other CSL analyses, right, the other types of analyses, but we do have to define a fluid domain. So you could choose internal or external. The external, you just define a volume, like a wind tunnel, that would put the flow over your product. For the internal, you're just going to choose any inlets or outlets, and then it'll actually construct that internal domain for you. So it'll find all of the hollow cavities that fluid could flow through if it were to enter in the inlet and exit the outlet. So very simple, very straightforward. From there, you can define a material. That's easy to do with that edit materials option. Carbon dioxide is a pretty good estimation of what this muffler would have running through it. It's going to give us a good enough estimation of what to expect in real life. And then to apply some of the boundary conditions, we have the fluid flow velocity, right? So this is a flow velocity boundary condition. We also have a couple other ones, inlet, outlet, pressure, mass flow, slip symmetry. All you do is follow the instructions on the menu, and it walks you through whatever might be needed. You can also put thermal conditions on your fluid. So if we want to put a prescribed temperature at the inlet, maybe we know that the fluid that's going to come into the muffler is always 700 degrees Celsius. And so now that will be taken into account during our simulation. To add the outlet boundary condition, this is going to be a pressure boundary condition. Again, we have a menu that asks us for anything that's needed. In this case, it was just that one pressure number, magnitude, and we have 0 atmospheres. So this one's going to come out into the regular atmospheric pressure. So from here, all we have to do is hit simulate, and we have the option to refine the mesh more if we want. So that's that little slider between speed and accuracy. This is a meshless environment, so there's no need to ever see or edit the mesh other than saying, I'd like it to be as refined as possible, slide that slider towards accuracy, or towards speed to say, I just need the fastest possible. Now, as soon as we hit simulate, we're seeing this transient response. So the options for this are transient response. We also have the option to view a time average response. You can control this from the legend, the improved legend. We have options like particles, and you can control those even a little bit finer. So the colors, the emitter radius, maybe the size or transparency. And this makes it very easy to tell where you have stagnant areas. We can tell that there are some really stagnant areas in this model already where there's just not much velocity at all. The fluid really isn't reaching, right? It's kind of sitting still in those areas. And so you can get a better view of that maybe in your direction field, understand exactly what these different cut cross sections might look like. And you can see that there are some of these little vortexes around that might be causing some problems with getting that fluid out through the back. Now, one of the most important things, for example, in the muffler, one of the design considerations is the exit velocity. So you can use a simulation probe to see what exactly is the velocity there. If you don't want to try to interpret it from your legend, you want to just have a number that you can watch to see how it changes when you make edits to your model. You can also see with the velocity, because this is a time response, right? You can see that there's the velocity over time. So you get that little graphic. Now here we see the pressure looks okay, and we can understand all of this information and then take it to make some changes. So to open up a design exploration extension session, we're going to look at what some changes might look like. So the design exploration session is just a tool for managing different versions of your model. So for example, we're going to have a sandbox environment to be able to make changes and save them along the way. Now, the first change you might want to make is these baffles, right? What if we made these longer? Looks like that might do something to the flow, and it can be hard to tell without some kind of analysis, right? You'd have to take this design all the way through to the validation before you would know. But with CSL, as soon as you accept those changes, you can see how that changes the flow. And right away, you can see a couple of those stagnant areas have been eliminated. And the fluid velocity, you can take a look at that graph to say, hey, what kind of a change did this have on my model? Looks like not too big of a change, so maybe it's time to try some other options, right? Maybe changing the external dimensions would be more effective than changing the internal dimensions. So now you have those that capability to see, hey, you know, I think it's more worthwhile to make changes to this aspect than these. Make sure that you're moving in the right direction and making effective changes. So coming back to circle back to the end of our presentation here, I can pass it back over to Shannon or Rebecca. If anyone has questions or comments, we can take those now.
Hi, thanks, Emily. We actually do have a couple questions for you. The first one being, is there a manufacturing constraint for die and cast products?
Yep, so this manufacturing constraint would be in generative design, and there are a couple of manufacturing constraints, including extruded or milled and 3D printed, right? So additive manufacturing. There's also one for creating that part line for die and cast parts and having draft. So it does take that into account during the optimization. Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. The second one is, how easy is it to create a multi-body?
Yeah, multi-bodies are really easy to create. It's just going to be an option up in your design toolbar. You can create them while you're starting off, you know, after you've created that sketch. You can also create them on the fly by defining different volumes, and you have all those options, and it's just a little drop down to say create new multi-body, and it'll define that for you. So very simple.
Great, thank you. And the last question that just came in, it's a bit of a two-part question, and it starts off as, in Creo Fluid Simulation Live, how do you control the steam line emitter diameter, and how do you control the location of the cut plane?
Yeah, so the location of the cut plane, if you're talking about the one that we saw in the demo here with that direction vector, you can either set it from right, so it's going to come up on a point on a coordinate system, and you can set a displacement, so through you know, positive or negative, some direction in your model. You can also use the dragger to pull it into place. As for the first part of that question, I think I would have to follow up on that after the call. I can reach back out in an email.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we could definitely do that for the asker. And it looks like we don't have any more questions in the chat box. So just as a reminder, I highly encourage you all to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as we have previous Creo, MathCAD, and Windchill webinars and tutorials. You can follow follow Tech30 on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as well to be updated on any upcoming events, webinars, and exclusive deals from PTC. And with that being said, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.